Hi, Michaela with Michaela's Counseling here. I want to rip on some books and trainings that I've been reading and attending. Obviously, trainings I love, books I love, or I wouldn't be reading or attending them. A lot to learn, but I'm here to rip on them today. That's what I'm here for. Here's my issue, and here's the question of the day: is does trauma, and not just trauma, difficult pasts like deprivation, broken relationships, unmet needs in your life, in your early life, does it mean that you are necessarily broken now? Does it mean that you are this deeply impaired person that just cannot function at this point? And is your lack of functioning, or is your level of impairment contingent on the level of trauma? And I'm going to say that there's some very, very helpful things about being able to look at what's happening in our systems, what's happened in our histories, and being able to go, it really makes sense that, when my reach wasn't met when I was a child, I find myself kind of, I'll reach out now and I'll retract it, or my hand will shake, like it's harder for me to reach now, right? Something in me doesn't have that expectation of being met, right? Or to say, I had this really scary thing happen in a car when I was a kid, and sometimes or as an adult, right? When there's a weird lurch or there's unexpected traffic coming from a direction I wasn't seeing, I'll have a startle response, right? These are contextual kinds of issues. They make sense in light of the history. And that's great, because as we know those, we can work on them, we can work through them, we can begin to kind of inform our mind and inform our heart about, like, yeah, it makes sense that I feel this way here. But also I'm generally welcome now in this space, or generally other traffic looks too. There are people in those cars too that are also very concerned for our safety, and we're all in this together. So I've been reading this stuff that basically has this model that isn't all bad, but isn't that accurate either. That basically says exponentially, like, the more your needs went unmet, or the more scary jolts you've kind of had to your system, the more impaired you necessarily are. And I just don't think that this holds true. I think that it has its utility, and yet I look at people who I've met who have been through extraordinary trauma. They've been through extraordinary hardship. I think of people who grew up in another country and were in a war-torn area, or did not have predictable food, or were in a society that was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Incredibly oppressive in a variety of ways towards different groups, right? Or even people who've had that experience here in some way, in some group, and it just doesn't happen to work out when you're talking with people from different backgrounds, that the level of difficulty that you've been through in any way determines how kind you're able to be now, how present you're able to be now, how much you appreciate life. In fact, in some ways, I think that there's something about trauma, there's something about deprivation, there's something about fighting for survival or biding your time and waiting for welcome that actually can lead to these really deep places within us that really orient to beauty in the world in a way that maybe people who've had everything handed to them don't notice, or that really might let us observe people through really perceptive eyes in the way that somebody who didn't learn that they had to notice what was happening in their environment all the time might not do. Another thing is that we often, when we've been through trauma, when we've been through really difficult times, we have a level of empathy and compassion. And it's like everybody can understand some range of human emotions. In fact, I think we can all understand them all generally, right? But the more that you've been through, the more experience you've had with those really deep, really dark, really lonely, really lost places, even with those places of terror, the more you have the capacity to have that resonance for other people's experience. So my issue when we start looking in terms of trauma and deprivation and necessary impairment, is we can accidentally impose on ourselves. We can impose on other people. If we're helpers, we can impose on like our clients or our helpees. This idea of, oh my goodness, I heard from a client once that they had gone to a therapist who heard their history, and the therapist looked at them and went, "You have no right to be doing as well as you're doing. Like, I just don't get it." And then their treatment plan was to make the client feel really, really horrible, because that would be commensurate with their trauma, right? Like, they felt like somehow you're functioning a little bit too well for this to match. That's terrible. That's a terrible idea. So we've got traumatic responses. We also have resources that come alongside any kind of trauma or deprivation that get us through. I guarantee it. If you are sitting here listening to my video right now, you're not like a set of like broken pieces that can't function. You're online looking for information, or you subscribe to this lady that said stuff that you found interesting. If you are able to look online and find a therapist that connects for you, or a coach, then you are so very you still have so much hope, and you still have so much agency, and you're able to do some things. And for me, this is a both and. If you're looking for counseling, you recognize that there are places in you that are scared, right? That have a hard time reaching out, or that feel really angry and out of control, either internally or externally, or, but you also have an awareness of what the issues are, and you wouldn't even seek help. You wouldn't even watch videos about it if there wasn't also like a deep place of knowing within you that it can be better, that you have the capacity for more. So yeah, trauma, it's not, this isn't to say that trauma is in any way a good thing. It is not, but the capacities that you've grown through it, I don't want you to lose track of that either. And I don't think it's any of our lot to have a personality or a life or a capacity for connection or functioning that is predetermined by our life events. It just isn't true. And there are things that we can work through. There are things that we can find. Absolutely, trauma has an impact. Absolutely, deprivation has an impact. Absolutely, there's a place for grief, and there's a place for shaking things out, and there's a place for acknowledging how scary it was, and sometimes once we're able to acknowledge how hard things have been, how difficult functioning can be for us in the midst of some experiences, I don't know if you've had the experience of when you're able to cry or shake or acknowledge how hard it is, it gets easier. So I'm not saying that we're just gonna, be Pollyanna-ish and go, oh yeah, it's fantastic that you went through these things. Let's talk about how great of a person you are as a result, and how nothing at all is difficult, because if you've been through difficult things and you're seeking out help, things are agonizing for you. We don't want to lose track of the agony in some moments, but things are also, with every person I've seen, also unspeakably beautiful in moments. And the kind of perspective that people bring to this work, the kind of perspective that people find, it's, to me, it feels to me beyond what I don't even know what an ordinary person is, but people who go through their life without ever particularly feeling the need to pick up a self-help book, without ever particularly feeling the need to see a counselor, without ever particularly feeling the need to manage their relationships or their environment. Wonderful people, great. Don't have always the level of insight, the level of perception, the appreciation for beauty, the resonance with others that people who have had really deep difficulties have. Is that the end of that sentence? So, if you've been through difficult things, remember that it's not only is it not who you are, not only does that pain not define you, but there are some gifts that come out of it, and there are some things that you can do. There's some ways that you think. There's some ways that you feel, that you intuit, that you connect with the world, with people, with thoughts, that take a look around you at people who seem normal, and look at some of the things that you do and some of the ways that you think that you don't see around you. There may well be a connection between what you had to do in childhood or what you had to do to get through difficult times and some of the really beautiful things that you bring to the world now. So keep hope. And man, with this kind of focus, with this kind of work, to me, it's always so fundamentally important that we remember that we're all humans first. We're not trauma survivors. We're not, victims of, oppression first. We are not pawns of our environment. We're not. There's more to us than that. We are impacted, but it's not the final word. I am saying the same thing in a bunch of ways. I am feeling really deeply passionate about this and a little angry with these trainings. I'm a little bit afraid are making helpers walk away and go, gosh, I thought my clients were doing great, and it turns out that they're not. They must be really impaired. Let's look for that. And for me, it's so important that we keep the sense of resource, we keep the sense of hope, we keep the sense of personhood first, and those are difficult things that we can work through together. Absolutely, we can look at deeply. They don't define you. So I look forward to talking with you soon. I know it's been like a long time since my last video, and I don't really know what to say about that, except that I have some other topics I'm looking forward to talking with you about soon in the next couple weeks or so. Thanks and bye for now.